House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy is expected to meet with Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene this week as he faces growing pressure to punish the freshman Republican over her inflammatory rhetoric. Congresswoman Greene has refused calls to resign after espousing anti-Muslim, anti-Semitic, and violent claims. The QAnon supporter has publicly embraced conspiracy theories surrounding 9/11 and school shootings, even appearing in video taunting survivors. This has prompted Democrats to call for her removal from the House Education and Labor Committee, to which she was recently appointed. Congressman Andy Levin is one of those Democrats. He serves as the vice chair of the Education and Labor Committee, and he's here with me now to talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene. All right, Congressman, thanks for joining us so early. While it's been mostly Democrats calling for the Congresswoman to face consequences for her words and actions, there's been some support from GOP members as well. I want to play some sound from Republican Adam Kinzinger yesterday.
I'd certainly vote her off committee. In terms of eviction, I'm not sure, because kind of in the middle. I think a district has every right to put who they want there, but we have every right to take a stand and say you don't get a committee, and we definitely need to do that.
Okay, so here's the thing. Congresswoman Greene's ties or support for QAnon conspiracy theories, none of this stuff is new. In Georgia, certainly the people who elected her knew all about what her beliefs are. I guess the question is, why haven't we heard more Republicans speaking out? You know, it's one thing to say, well, you know, there are some conservative beliefs that there's an agreement on. But some of this behavior, taunting the victims of school shootings, I don't think anyone thinks that's justifiable. So why haven't we heard more from Republicans?
It's a really good question, Anne Marie. I think people need to understand how Congress works. The people of a district elect someone to Congress, then they go. But it's up to the party that person's a member of whether they get assignments to committees, and if so, what committees. Marjorie Taylor Greene does not belong in Congress at all. The idea that the Republican leadership appointed her to the House Education and Labor Committee is just unbelievable, and it's wrong. And Adam Kinzinger, my colleague, is correct. They should remove her right away.
Democrat Jimmy Gomez from California wants to see her gone from Congress completely. Do you support his resolution to have her, for her expulsion, rather?
I do not think Marjorie Taylor Greene belongs in Congress. Someone who would harass a teenager with fake ideas that there was not a shooting at his school when he personally was there. Someone who denies that the shooting took place at a school in Connecticut. Imagine if you're one of those parents of Sandy Hook children who were murdered. Someone who says that Jewish bankers control sky lasers that started the wildfires in California. You're right. This isn't about conservative views or liberal views. This person is not connected to reality. She's spreading falsehoods and conspiracy theories, and that's not something that belongs in the U.S. Congress.
So, you know, some of the things that we've heard from Congresswoman Greene, you're right, it's sort of on the extreme. But she was one of 139 Republicans to vote against the Electoral College vote count of President Biden. And this is even after the assault on the Capitol. When you hear Republicans call for unity in the wake of the attack and not press forward with President Trump's impeachment trial, in fact, say that the impeachment trial is what is causing division, do you worry about the ability of Congress moving forward to work across the aisle and get anything done, particularly when we're looking at some very, very expensive, large pieces of legislation that needs to be passed imminently, like in the near future?
You're right, Anne Marie. Just imagine, I'm just a member of Congress. I'm at my job. A violent mob ransacks the Capitol with us inside, trying to kill people, take people hostage. We come back into the House chamber, one of the sacred places of democracy worldwide, amidst broken glass with blood freshly swabbed up from the speaker's lobby, and a majority of my Republican colleagues vote to nullify the votes of millions of fellow Americans in Arizona and Pennsylvania. And by the way, they tried to nullify our votes as Michiganders as well as people in Nevada and Georgia. They just couldn't even find one senator to go along with that. In a way, the Republicans who voted against our democracy, against our election, when 60 courts had thrown out the challenges as being baseless and everything was investigated, the vote was certified by all 50 states. Those people are also insurrectionists. They tried to essentially overthrow our democracy just to keep one person in charge. That's strongman rule. That is not democracy. You know, democracy is a fragile experiment, always. As John Lewis said, it's a verb, not a noun. And we have to fight to defend our democracy. And so working with Republicans who went off the Democratic reservation altogether is difficult. That said, we have to try. There are a lot who didn't vote that way. A recent development over the weekend, for example, was essentially a coup in Burma. I've been working on human rights in Burma for years. I have Republican colleagues who work with me on it, and I'm going to keep trying to work with those of goodwill to do that. And even on COVID relief, we must try to work with Republicans. But if they're going to block the president's plan, and if they're going to come and say, we need something 1/3 as large instead, no aid to state and local governments when their budgets have been in the tank for this for a year now, that's just not acceptable, and we'll have to move forward with the reconciliation process. They are so lucky to have Joe Biden in the White House who wants to reach out to them, but I think he's making clear that we have to meet the urgency of this moment, and if they won't do it, we'll have to find a way to do it by ourselves.
I want to dig in more to that, particularly when it comes to schools. I want to point out to our viewers that we did reach out to Congresswoman Greene for a statement. We've received a statement from her office essentially saying that Democrats are going after her because she is supporting the will of the people as opposed to the will of other politicians. That's sort of paraphrasing, just so you know. But I want to get into your area of expertise. You are a member of the House Education and Labor Committee. Joe Biden wants to see in-school learning back in his resume across the country in his first 100 days. It occurs to me and many others that is a very expensive proposition. That, you know, a little bit what we've seen as a result of this pandemic is areas where that have been lacking before, areas that were not properly funded before, are buckling under the strain of this pandemic. And I think about many, many public school systems across the country where you have 40 kids in a kindergarten classroom. How do you open a school like that and keep any sort of semblance of social distancing and those sort of challenges? So I want to ask you, how realistic do you see the Biden administration's hope to have in-classroom learning again in the first 100 days? What needs to occur to make that happen?
Well, I think Governor Whitmer here in Michigan has taken the right approach in terms of encouraging schools to have some level of in-person learning. But you're so right. The inequities have been brought right to the fore by the pandemic. We need to get, first of all teachers vaccinated right now, and they need to be vaccinated if we are to reopen schools. Secondly, we have to rush money to the states and the local governments as well as schools. What people may not think about is that state budgets provide crucial support for schools. And so if you refuse to help states, you're cutting K-12 budgets. And that just won't work when, as you point out, you need more distancing, so you're going to need more real estate, more rooms open. You need more teachers because the kids have to be in much smaller groups for things to be safe. What we've seen around here is that private schools with a lot more resources have been more able to open up in person than public schools. And if we want public schools to do it, we're going to have to make them safe and give them all the PPE they need and help them to have the resources so that they can open up in a safe way. We know what that means, right? Everybody needs to be masked. People need to stay 6 feet apart. It's just the will to do it. And my Republican colleagues who agree that in-person learning is obviously better for kids have to step up to the plate and provide the resources so schools can do it safely. That's the bottom line.
That's the bottom line. Congressman Levin, thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne Marie. It's great to see you. Take care of yourself.